I'm Dr. Berry, licensed psychologist, and here we talk about true crime and psychology. Thank you so much for joining. Let's hop right into today's topic. Let's go. Hello, welcome, and thank you to everybody from Courtroom Confidential that is here as well. I'm super glad to have lawyer Josh Ritter here on the show, and I do have links if you are not following and subscribed to Courtroom Confidential and the Courtroom Confidential Trials channels. I have both of those linked down in the description, as well as all the Instagram, all of the different socials. So please make sure to check out our guest. I was a guest over on his channel recently, and we had a phenomenal discussion that I reached out to his wife and said, hey, I really would love to break down the Tepe murders case a little bit more, because we were just getting into how we could help people avoid or if somebody was in a situation like this, where could we help? Where could someone possibly step in? My goal with this channel is always to share information. So please note there's a content warning. The details discussed for this case, I'm not going to go into the gory details, but in general, these details are troubling. So please take care of your mental health. This also is not psychological advice or legal advice. We are just speaking from our different areas of expertise and talking about this case in a general way based on publicly available information. And so, Josh, thank you so much for being here. Can you tell my audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm so honored. And we did have a great conversation. I think it was just this last week, Monday or Wednesday or something, that we had a really phenomenal conversation. So I appreciate that. Thank you again. I started my career in law as a prosecutor with the L.A. District Attorney's Office. I was there for about 10 years. And I handled a wide variety of cases. When they first start you out in the office, you're in misdemeanors, but misdemeanors doesn't mean less serious. It just means that the exposure a person is looking at is not prison time. But I handled all sorts of crimes involving domestic violence, child abuse, all of the things that we're going to be getting into today. And then eventually you move on to felonies, and I handled a lot of cases dealing with that in felonies as well, including, murder cases that dealt with that as an aspect, domestic violence. So I was there for over 10 years. It's hard to say because I was a DA for about 10 years, but I had been in the office as a law clerk for a few years beyond that as well. So most of my career had been spent in that office. And then I left to go into private practice about 10 years ago now. And so I've been in private practice as a criminal defense attorney since that time, and also dealing with cases like this. Sometimes people who are accused of things like we're going to discuss, and sometimes also as a victim's advocate, which a lot of people don't realize, that many private attorneys are hired by victims because the prosecutors don't really represent the victims. They represent the state. They're trying to prosecute a crime, and the victims themselves don't, maybe there's a victim's advocate, maybe there's someone out there that they can talk to, but they don't really have a lawyer. Yeah. So sometimes I'll get hired by people who are victims of crimes, and they just want help and representation and somebody to kind of hold their hand through the whole process. So that's my career. And now it's involved the crazy world of YouTube and everything else, but I enjoy it.
Nice. And for anybody that's new to my channel, I am a licensed psychologist in the state of Virginia. I've been practicing under my own license since 2010, and I've always focused on people with histories of trauma. That has always been an area, helping survivors of harm. That has always been an area of focus. Anytime I worked with a perpetrator, it was normally a child perpetrator, and never for any type of essay. So I'm not that type, because there are therapists that specialize in rehabilitation. That was not my area of expertise. I did help families in crisis. So I've done in-home therapy, inpatient, and right now have my own outpatient practice where I provide outpatient therapy and psychological testing. I've worked a lot with some high conflict families where there have been allegations of things on one side or both. And I'm normally working with the child, or if I am working with one of the parents in a situation, my goal is to always just talk about safety. How do we create safety? And also, how do we provide people with resources? What a lot of people don't know is, as a therapist, I was not trained how to help survivors of narcissistic abuse. I was trained how to help people with those features, but not
Oh,
necessarily the people that had experienced that type of harm. And so I've done additional training under the work of Dr. Ramani. She's an expert in the field in helping survivors. She has a book called It's Not You, because a lot of times people that are in difficult situations, they often blame themselves. I should have known better. I should have saw the sign. I should have done this. There are a lot of things that can come up in cases like this. And so I did just want to start with a brief overview, just in case someone is completely new to this case and does not know anything at all. But back in late December, there was a horrific crime in Ohio. And let me just pull up my notes real quick. Y'all know, so I have squirrel moments here, and I am on track. So yes, December 30th, Monique Tepe, the ex, and so Monique Tepe and her husband Spencer Tepe were found deceased in their home. I believe it was the following day, or it might have, because it might have been that morning. Yes, this December 30th. And there has been a new affidavit that has come up. And thank you to Paul from Reporting Live from My Sofa. He actually DM'd me to be like, oh my gosh, there's this new affidavit. And so I was glad I was able to check it out before going on to your show. But Michael McKee, Monique's ex-husband, and they were only married for like less than, because I think they were married for maybe 8 months or so, separated, and then legally divorced by 2017. And now, all these years later, there are these allegations that he's continued to harass her all of this time. Those are the allegations that have been made. And the state has enough evidence where they have charged him with the murders of Monique and her husband Spencer. And all because I looked up an article that talked about, because it was Dr. Michael McKee. He was a vascular surgeon. He graduated from medical school. It's my understanding, as a child, he won all of these awards. It seemed like he had all of these accomplishments, and yet he just would not let Monique go. And what are your thoughts about this case?
yeah. When we first found out that the man arrested was her ex-husband, one, I would say my initial reaction would goes, okay, that seems to be somebody who would be on the prime suspect list, someone that would have a prior relationship with all of them. It was funny because initially when the case was unsolved, everybody was feeling that Spencer, the husband, may have been the primary target, and that they were looking into, people were wondering, well, something to do with his dentistry practice or something. But, it comes back to prior relationships again. But then when you realize, like what you just pointed out, that this was a very short marriage, it didn't involve children. Usually, custody disputes are going to be a big reason why people decide they need to go to violence. Didn't seem like money was a big part of the divorce. And it was, something like 8 years ago. All of these questions start to come up, like, why after all of this time? And then when you find out, as you pointed out, he's this professional, a doctor, and you know better than anybody how much work and discipline goes into that. Me from kind of my just, not professional perspective, as regards to the inner workings of someone's mind goes, what in the world is causing this person to be so obsessed after this many years, especially a person that doesn't have a criminal record? Usually, something like this, we would expect, oh, well, he's got a criminal record. He's got a history of violence. He's been in and out of the prison system for things like this. And this was like, quote unquote, bound to happen. No criminal record that we know of, professional person. And this 8-year period of time, it really not only was very mysterious, but then became, to me at least, like kind of far more ominous. Like the idea that someone could obsess over someone to the point of traveling. By the way, I mean, the other thing that was remarkable to add to all of that is they don't live nearby. It's not like he runs into her at the market and it's like, oh, this constant reminder. She's 2 states away, living her own life, not in his face. And for him to continue to obsess about her for this period of time is just really ominous and really scary, that there are people like that are not the usual suspects of a type of person we'd expect to commit this type of crime.
And that's where I do think that a part of the reason why this case is getting so much attention is because it was this vascular surgeon to go into vascular surgery. So I have a friend whose husband is a cardiologist, and you have to get accepted into the residency, the fellowship. Like this is, and it's not something that just anybody can do. So anybody can't just decide, oh, I want to be a vascular surgeon. Like there are all of these steps and things that you have to do. And what it reminds me is that somebody can have this professional success, but then not have this personal success. Because to me, an individual like this that couldn't let this relationship go, there was likely a controlling nature. It was likely about power. And there was a vindictiveness that is really scary, because I'm sure some people might have thought Monique was paranoid about him. Like somebody that didn't fully know it, they might be like, it was 8 years ago. Like, why are you still like, he's all the way, he's in Illinois, you're in Ohio, but her fear was real. And so as a therapist, when I am working with somebody, we often talk about, because sometimes someone with traits like this, they'll get close to the line, but they don't always cross it. So that's where you might see them on the Ring camera, but they're just driving by. They're not coming up to the house. And so that's where sometimes people let their neighbors know, which can be embarrassing to let your neighbors know, like, hey, if you see this car, the neighbors that you're really close to, like it wouldn't just be every neighbor, it wouldn't be anything random, but if you're close to your neighbors, sometimes a person says like, hey, if you see this car in the area, just give me a heads up. And that's sometimes how people find some of that evidence to possibly file a protective order if they need it. But just because a person drives by your house doesn't mean that you'll necessarily get that protective order.
Very true. Just for your listeners to understand too, getting a protective order is not super easy. There's two types of orders. You can get what's called a temporary restraining order, what we call it here in California. They might call it emergency orders in other jurisdictions, but you can fill out paperwork, put an affidavit in there, say, this person's been threatening me, and it's a fairly low standard, and a judge will grant that, but it's temporary until you have a hearing.
Yeah.
And then at the hearing, you're going to have to present evidence as to why this should become a permanent restraining order. And judges are reluctant to do that because you're essentially asking to limit this person's freedom, which is no small thing. You're saying you can't talk to this person, which is, your First Amendment right. You can't go near this person, which is restricting your freedom. And it's something that comes up, though it's not technically a criminal conviction, it comes up on your record. When you get pulled over in the car and they run your name and date of birth, it's going to come up that you've got this restraining order. So they're very, reluctance, not the right word. They're very selective, and they make sure that they only give these when they feel like there's a real need for a protection. So going back to our case, question number one is going to be, wait a minute, this person lives 2 states away from you. Why exactly do you need a restraining order for this person? And you're right. Maybe it's the difficulty of getting one, or you talked about embarrassment. I think that's a huge factor too, or just the idea of being scrutinized by his lawyer in court in front of a judge might scare people away from doing these things. So I think that is important for people to understand, as far as why hadn't she done anything if he was continuing to harass her after all of this time? It could be many, many good reasons for it. God, I had a question for you. It was about, we had talked when we talked earlier on my channel about, this to you is just something that speaks so loudly of obsession. And you talked about how much professional accomplishment he had. I didn't realize that becoming a vascular surgeon is not just something you say, I want to do. You have to be accepted to. I'm wondering though, does this seem like somebody who may have gone into like a personal end point in their life? Maybe their professional life progressed, but their personal life came to a complete halt, because not only was he obsessed, but it doesn't seem like he in any way moved on.
No.
He didn't get remarried. He didn't, we don't believe there's nothing that we've heard that who's even involved in a relationship. So here she is living her best life, marries this man. He's a professional as well. Sounds like he's got a successful practice. They have 2 beautiful kids, beautiful life. And he's gone into this like complete stagnation personally. Maybe professionally, he's doing great, but personally, it's like he stopped.
That brings me to the affidavit where friends or where a witness has come forward and said that during Monique and Michael's marriage, that he made threats to her, made numerous threats on her life during and after, and that he made statements that he could kill her at any time. He would find her and buy the house right next to her, and she will always be his wife. So I really think she chose to leave him. And I'm skipping over because there was an allegation of SA, and non-consensual strangulation is a huge red flag. Somebody that during DV gets to the point of putting their hands around someone's neck, for lethal violence, that is a huge red flag. So I think this is a great legal question, because this was included for the probable or the affidavit, and you would know more about that because Sarah asks, is that admissible?
Sure. So what we're talking about is what's called prior bad acts. And in many states, especially when it comes to prior bad acts of domestic violence, those are even more admissible, even easier for the prosecution to get in. In fact, in California, which has some of the strongest laws on this in the country, prior bad acts of domestic violence come in to prove propensity. In other words, to say, hey, this person did it in the past. You can take that as evidence that they're a type of person to have committed this crime that we're talking about now. The issue, as far as admissibility, is how are they going to be able to prove this prior bad act? So if she told someone, you're going to have some hearsay issues. They're going to have to get around that. And there might be ways to get around it. If she reported it to the police, it's going to be far easier. If somebody witnessed it, it's going to be far easier. But, you know as well as I do that most of these types of crimes dealing with domestic violence take place in the home, behind closed doors, in front of no one. And so there's zero evidence to corroborate, unless there's injuries, what the victim is saying took place. So I imagine the prosecution right now is working on that, trying to find any instance they can of prior violence that he has had, even if that's not didn't manifest itself physically, but prior threats or anything. And how are they going to get them admissible? But they are admissible as prior bad acts, as long as you can pass the foundational hurdles of getting them into court.
And I'm going to start making it through some of the questions. And
Yeah.
so Marissa Monroe asks, this guy was a surgeon. Why would he throw his life away to do this? And I think he tried to get away with it. Because
Oh, yeah.
on that affidavit, you also find out that about 3 weeks before this incident, that they have evidence that he was at their home. It's not clear, because what was that legal term? Because it's like he was on
Curtilage.
property.
Curtilage. Yeah.
He was on the curtilage.
You never use that term anywhere else, but when you're talking about curtilage, basically means the surrounding area of your home, but not inside it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that could have meant that he was on their yard or he was on their front porch. I've seen a picture of the home and I can't remember. I think there is some sort of front porch area. And that's what you usually mean by the curtilage. But sorry.
No. That was perfect. Because it was like, why would he throw his life away? And I think that visit might have been, and I wonder if the state will use that to try to prove premeditation.
Oh,
because
yeah.
the day of the incident, it seems like he drove down, he parked far away, he walks, and it's my understanding that he flipped out license plates.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he's arrested, it's my understanding that he had tried to scrape off a part of like something on his car. And so which could potentially point to some consciousness of guilt. And I don't know how that comes in the state of Ohio, but that could just be the level of his obsession, that this meant more, that he would throw his entire, I think is he 37? I feel like I don't think he's 40.
39.
39.
Yeah.
And almost turning 40, that could be a thing too.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I could imagine, because my understanding, she didn't post a lot on social media, and that was probably, he could have been a reason why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
so scary that she had to live with this for as long as she did. No, I think you make excellent points about premeditation and planning. I fully believe he meant to get away with it.
Yeah.
Sounds like he did a pretty good job of nearly getting away with it. You remember in the early days, all they had was kind of some grainy video. There's no real, that we are aware of right now, but there's no real video of his face. He didn't leave behind any real forensic evidence that we're aware of. I mean, they were kind of going off of a very sparse evidence initially, but now we're finding out, it sounds like anybody that they talked to said, you got to check out this guy, McKee. He's a real problem. But I think he did try to cover his steps for sure. One thing I wanted to point out too is that this prior December 6th, so the murders take place on December 30th. It's December 6th that he's seen at the curtilage of the house. To me, that might just be the only time that they're aware of. Yeah. Because that falls within that 30-day period that most electronic devices would have before they start to write over things. So it could be, if they had the entire footage of that house for the past 8 years, he could have been out there a dozen different times. We don't know. But we know that at least within a few weeks of the murders taking place, he was out there. Very scary. Definitely evidence of premeditation. Perhaps even, a dry run. Maybe he was trying to figure, there's still a big question of how did he get inside the home? That could have been part of it. He could have been using that opportunity to figure out how he's going to get into the home. Yes.
And Sarah, thank you for the super chat. And Sarah says, one way that people can help is through digital forensics, where we can look at Google Trends with the benefit of hindsight. The data we discover and data points are helping with predictive violence patterns. And so Sarah mentioned that. There was also, and thank you, Eroy, and I think this might be, from your channel, because they mentioned being juiced up. And so thank you for gifting 5 memberships. And then this question. So a question that Monique ended up leaving him, getting away, and yet all these years later, she was harmed. Were there signs that you saw that could have helped? And him threatening him threatening harm during the relationship, definitely a red flag. Probably one of the many reasons why she decided to end it. He was probably viewed by others as a catch because he's this
Oh
like
yeah, on paper,
on paper,
right? Sure.
but then within the relationship, it doesn't sound like it was safe. And then afterwards, it seems like there continued to be these threats. And I want to talk about post-separation abuse, because sometimes what happens after the relationship can be worse than what happens within it. And many victims, especially if they're going through a divorce, and then so the person starts obsessing over all these things and they start engaging in verbal, emotional, financial, they start engaging in these different types of coercive control. Sometimes people question, should I just stay? And because the reaction to them leaving gets so unsafe that
Wow.
sometimes it can be worse than what happened within
That's
the
so
actual
bad.
relationship.
Yeah.
And
I'd rather deal with the day-to-day abuse than deal with the out of hand violence of if they leave.
because normally within a relationship, if they're in the relationship, there's this cycle that includes repair. So
Right.
within a domestic violence relationship, normally the conflict builds, and then there might be some type of harm, and then there's normally a repair where the person is apologetic, they say they're never going to do it again, they say they're going to go to therapy. But with post separation abuse, you don't get that. It's just harm, harm, harm. You don't get that cycle because they've already lost them. They're not trying to
Right.
keep them, they're just trying to torment them. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because we don't always talk about that. And I do have resources. So, one of the worst things you can do if you suspect a friend or loved one might be in a harmful relationship is say, I think I think that relationship is abusive, because the person in it, they likely don't see it or they don't want other people to see it. And so sometimes first starting with helping them build themselves up, and so sometimes you can't always use that language of, I think they're aggressive. Like, you can't always use the language. You can't say, I think they might be narcissistic, or you can't use that language. Sometimes you have to just give the person a book that's like, it's not you. Just give them a resource. And if you are going to give somebody a resource, I recommend that it be digital, something that other person can't find. And then if people are going to research ways to leave, or ways, if something isn't safe, they can consult. Most areas have domestic violence, not shelp, but they have resource centers. In my area, it's called Empower House. Each area often has um, areas that provide different resources to people, where sometimes they might go with you to court. They often don't provide legal advice, but if people are in the financial place to be able to consult with a lawyer, I think sometimes that can be helpful. Can you speak a little bit about that? How maybe if Monique had consulted with a lawyer, what you think they might have recommended or said?
Sure. And what I should add too is
Mhm,
that what I experienced as a prosecutor
mhm.
many times, many times I'd be dealing with victims who were in, low income poverty households. And it wasn't a matter of they didn't want to leave.
They couldn't.
It was what are they gonna do? He
Yeah.
might be the sole provider of that family, and they've got, she's got 4 or 5 kids or something, and it's like, where are they gonna go? What are they gonna do? She's got no other resources. Perhaps, they had immigrated here, and she's got no family even here or something. I mean, it was story after story like that, that was just incredibly tragic, where in fact, most of the time, the victims didn't want the defendant prosecuted, because what am I gonna do if you send him off to prison? And
Mhm.
so, many times we would have people who were, quote unquote, "not cooperative with the prosecution," because as bad as it was, they kind of wanted the police there to stop the immediate problem, but they've got their whole life to deal with now, and dealing with living that life without this person, as abusive as they are, might be more difficult or unfathomable for them. So anyhow, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Mhm.
But if people do have resources and they do consult an attorney, I think it's smart because it gives you a better idea of how to navigate these waters, which a lot of people are intimidated by. Going back to the point that we were making about getting a restraining order, that's a difficult process, and it certainly helps to have an attorney hold your hand and lead you through that whole thing. But also, just reporting something to the police can sometimes be difficult.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of law enforcement, but I also am very realistic to understand that they are very poorly trained in what I would call, what is it? Patient, kind of that bedside manner, is they don't have. And so, I've experienced sometimes where people have tried to go into a police station to report something, and kind of the response from the guy at the desk was so non-interested and not helpful that they'll turn around and walk away and be like, well, I'm not doing that again. So sometimes having an attorney to kind of be a liaison to law enforcement, because the last thing I've noticed, and the most difficult thing, is they want to make sure if they're going to take this leap, if they're going to make a criminal complaint and they're going to be asked to testify, they want it done. What they don't want is this person getting out and getting off. And now they've done nothing but, they feel, throw fuel on the fire, and it's just going to get worse for them. And now they don't even have the protection of law enforcement and the criminal justice system. So I think that's a big part of why involving an attorney, if you're able to, is important.
Nice. I wanted to talk a little bit about coercive control. And I learned, and so I heard that term watching Grizzly True Crime. She was talking about a case in the UK. I believe they have laws about coercive control. The laws about domestic violence in the United States, it really can depend, and then how things are applied can depend from state to state. Often emotional harm is difficult to quantify. It can just be difficult, I think, sometimes, versus if somebody has a bruise, everybody can see it. But if somebody is berating someone and stalking them, harassing them, but some people, it is like 100 calls a day or something, where it's clearly excessive. But sometimes it might just be 5 times a day. But if the person had asked them to stop, that's where things can get a little bit gray, where it's not as clear. But with coercive control, it's this pattern where somebody may control who a person sees, what they wear, where they go. They might monitor and track everything the person does, controlling their everyday needs such as finances, medication, food, and/or exercise, regularly criticizing the person, manipulating them or blaming them so that they doubt themselves or their experiences, forcing them into unwanted intimacy, stopping a person from following their religion or cultural practices, threatening the individual, their children, family, or friends, manipulating co-parenting arrangements or child support, payments after relationship separation. And so those are just some general things. I also have additional information on coercive control down in the description as well. Had you heard that term, coercive control? Yeah.
I mean, I've heard it tossed around. I didn't realize it had like kind of a definition like that. But I mean, I've seen that all the time in cases that I've handled as a prosecutor. Certainly, I mean, a lot of it. I don't know if gaslighting is, if you like that term, or if it would fit into that. But I've also seen several situations where the abuser is overly almost makes it sound like you're misinterpreting my love for you.
Yeah.
I just love you so much. And that's why you make me act crazy. Right. And how could you possibly be mad that I want to know where you're at and that you're healthy and that I show up to your work with flowers. How could that possibly be bad? And it's this idea that they paint themselves as just this doting, loving person when really they're incredibly controlling and abusive, but it's just disguised as something else.
Mm-hmm. And Karen Cole, UK lawyer, she has a channel here on YouTube as well. She is a lawyer over in the UK, and it is a chargeable criminal offense in the UK. And it's that continuous pattern, and that's where I think people have to monitor and look at it. Thank you again, Sarah. Stalking is definitely a red flag. And just making sure that I didn't miss anything over here in the comments. And in researching to talk with Josh about this, I ended up finding information about 3 different types of domestic violence, where there is situational couple violence, and that is something that occurs within a relationship and it can escalate. And then there is violent resistance. That's where the victim might retaliate, and in some states they might have a self-defense claim. I've followed cases like that where it was kind of up to the jury to decide. Where somebody that maybe had this pattern of physical harm, there are police reports and everything, and then at some point they might harm or kill their attacker. If the state presses charges, then it can be up to the jury to decide whether it is self-defense or not. And then there is something called intimate terrorism. And that is a pattern of behavior where one partner uses violence in combination with coercive control, isolation, intimidation, economic harm to dominate the other person. It is often severe, persistent, and it can escalate over time, creating fear. And so this is a research term. I do have links down below if people want to look into that a little bit more, because I do think that this wasn't just normal, like a bad relationship, a toxic relationship. What she was experiencing, because it was so bad that 8 years later, according to the affidavit, her and her husband and some friends, I think it was December 6th, they are at a championship, the Big Ten championship game in Indiana, and with several other couples. And something happens to where Monique leaves the game early to go back to her hotel room during the second half. And friends asked Spencer why she left, and he told him that she was upset over something involving her ex-husband and was going back to the hotel. And that is just so. I've worked with people where maybe a year or 2 years later, they were still experiencing things, or years later, they're experiencing issues around custody. Like, it's normally around the kids. It's normally about going back to court about custody. But I've never personally worked with anybody that's experienced this level of continued threats, continued harassment. And it just really breaks my heart even to think about what those last moments been like for her, because I think he was jealous of her life.
Yeah.
I think he wanted her life. And while I'm grateful that he did not physically harm her children, I forgot to mention earlier that there was a 1 and a 4-year-old that were home at the time of this incident. And so Spencer Tepe must have had phenomenal coworkers, because they knew the morning he didn't show up to work. So that very next day, they knew something was wrong because they couldn't reach him, they couldn't reach her, and that was so out of character that they're immediately calling 911.
Yeah. Bravo to them that they didn't just kind of let it go. And who knows if it wasn't for them, because the police. Actually, I don't know if you remember this. There was a kind of a mishap where they went to the wrong house, but they didn't let it go. They showed up and they were able to to see that they had been killed, and you know, and perhaps getting on this early was made it easier for detectives to put together the case and solve it. Yeah, I thought you made such an interesting point when we chatted earlier this week about the December 6th incident, because I had said it stood out to me that Spencer didn't leave the game with her. And in no way am I trying to victim shame here or second guess him, but I was like, I was trying to put myself in his position. If my wife, if we had traveled, they lived in Ohio, they went to Indiana for this game, they had a hotel room, this was a big deal to them. If we had traveled somewhere for an event and she left halfway through it because her ex-husband from 8 years ago had done something, or somehow she got bothered by that, I would probably leave the game too. I'd be so concerned about whatever this was, or I'd be calling police, you know, if it was something more serious. And none of that happened. And it made me go, why? And you made an excellent point. And this resonated with me about how she may have been embarrassed by it or not wanting to trouble him with it. No. This is a big deal to you. You enjoy the game. I just have to go home. But that made me think, well, then this isn't the first time, right? This was an ongoing thing that she had been dealing with for perhaps their entire marriage. And so this was just another incident, and she didn't want to bother him with it once again, which goes to show you that she had been living under this continuing, what is the term that you used?
Intimate terrorism.
Yeah, intimate terrorism for 8 years or so with this man. And that is just heartbreaking to know that that was kind of her life, even though she's trying to build this beautiful life and not rub it in his face, that she was continuing to deal with that.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because in my work with survivors, sometimes they don't want what they're going through to affect other people around them, because they already feel that it's enough for them. And I do wonder if she was in any type, I could imagine that she had a therapist or therapy, and they could be subpoenaing, they could be taking a look at medical records.
Sure.
Because if I was working with an individual like her, while I wouldn't have put her ex's name in the chart anywhere, I would have said ex-husband. I would have documented a lot of the things that my client was saying, knowing that at some point my records could be subpoenaed, and this could potentially and not for, because my goal wouldn't be like, because I want my client to live, survive, you know, I would want them to be safe. But also I have worked some very difficult situations where I was like, God forbid something happened to my client. Like, I've been tracking when they've reported that they've seen their car, when they've reported all of the things that that a client might report. I often document that in my record. And as the therapist, so my client is okay telling me, because they know it doesn't stress me out. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I do. Now, I'm concerned for my client, but I still sleep at night. Their loved ones won't. Like their loved ones stress. And I think Spencer was the type of person, Dr. Spencer, I think he was the type of person that if she had wanted him to go with her, I think he would have went immediately.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But I think she said, stay, like, babe, stay. Like, I can't, like, I want you to enjoy with them. I'll feel way worse if you leave too. And that's where some of that isolation, because like she had to step away from her support because it was just that bad. And that's where this went beyond just what I consider to be like the more common DV that I sometimes hear about. Like, this was really severe for her.
Oh yeah. And you make an excellent point, just to jump in here from my attorney's perspective, is that we were talking about earlier, what evidence can they get in of this prior bad acts, prior abuse? That would come in therapist notes, because that one of the exceptions and one of the ways that evidence can become admissible is statements made to a therapist for the purposes of therapy, or to a doctor for the purposes of medical treatment. that type of stuff is admissible. So I'm sure they're doing that.
Mhm.
And I would be shocked too if she hadn't been talking to anyone.
Yeah.
Professionally.
Especially for those 8 years, for
Yeah.
that to have been going on for that long, I would suspect that she probably had been working with someone. And sometimes as a therapist, I recommend a client not react. So if they're working with somebody that's trying to get their attention, because I think he was kind of trying to ruin her life. I think he was trying to keep her scared. Based on everything that we've heard, he didn't want her to be happy. He didn't want her to be at peace. And so you mentioned it during when we were together last, that sometimes the best thing you can do is to live happy, is to be happy, move and that's what she was doing. He was not.
Yeah. Which was kind of to the question I had for you when we started was, it was like his life personally stopped. He couldn't get beyond, she moved on, but he didn't, which is just so bizarre to me. He moved on professionally and high functioning. It sounds like life professionally, but personally he couldn't move on. And I'm really curious to know if he had any kind of other relationships past the point with her, or if he just obsessed about her for 8 years.
And I will tell you something a little concerning. So I have worked with middle and high school students that have made statements like, my partner, like my boyfriend, girlfriend, they won't let me break up with them. They say they're going to harm themselves if we break up. Like sometimes these patterns start early, and that's where I would want everyone to get treatment. I always want, if I'm working with a person that's hearing that, I always want them to know it is your choice. If you are in a relationship and you can't leave, you're in a cult. Like that's
Yeah. Wow.
My husband and I, we choose each other every day. Like we're not with each other because we have to, because we don't have any other choice. Like it's like we are in a healthy, committed relationship, because sometimes I don't think he had a healthy view of, I think he thought she was his, but in a possessive, like she's not an individual person with her own wants, needs, desires.
I mean, he said that. The comment she made, that he said, "You will always be my wife." That is not romantic. That was said in as a threat, not as a romantic overture to her. That is really, he viewed her as property. I think you're absolutely right.
Do you have any tips for prosecutors or law enforcement, ways that they can work better with victims? They can better service victims.
First of all, there is absolutely room for improvement. And it's something that I think probably more training on both the law enforcement side and the prosecutor side, of just appreciating that. When I was a prosecutor, we did receive training, but probably not nearly enough. Here's part of the problem, is that law enforcement views themselves as trying to stop and solve crimes, right? And prosecutors view themselves as trying to prosecute and get convictions against defendants. And it can be viewed as almost like too compartmentalized and, I'm just doing my job sort of a thing. And my job isn't to worry about this victim and how they're going to be after the fact. After a guilty verdict, my job ends, right? And after an arrest, the detective's job ends. But to view it as, no, these are people's lives. They need continued support. And you need to appreciate that this isn't just some case to them. That this is their entire life. I think there's certainly room for training in that.
And I think sometimes law enforcement and prosecutors can get frustrated, because sometimes the day of an incident, the survivor of harm might say, I want to press charges.
Sure.
And then the next day they might change their mind, and I can get and understand that can be frustrating. There's some states that that where the victim or survivor, they don't get the choice, where if they walk in, they see it, they start the process. There's some states where they have to prosecute it. not a ton, but and then I did just want to comment, because there are a lot of people that do feel that Monique's husband should have went with her that day to the hotel. And that's, I wonder if because was December 6th, was that the day he was found outside their house in
Yes,
Ohio?
the
Okay.
same day. Yeah.
So I think they knew he wasn't in Indiana. And her going back to the hotel, I do think that for the people I work with, they do not want what they're experiencing to impact the people around them, because then it makes them feel worse. He's not only taking away, like, so now I'm leaving the game. Now my husband is leaving the game too. Now my friends are all concerned and they're all leaving the game too.
Right. And I've ruined everybody's day. Right. Yeah. No, I completely appreciate that point that you made. Yeah. And again, I think it goes back to, this might have been one of a number of different times where maybe he did, when it first started to happen, let's stop everything. But now 8 years in, it's like, oh, it's her ex again. He's a crazy guy, but he lives in Illinois. Don't anybody worry. She's just going to have to deal with, who knows? I mean, I don't want to speculate too much, but I don't also want to go after him at all. But one thing I did want to touch on that you mentioned about how people immediately, the crime is taking place, they call the police, they say, I want to press charges, and then they change their mind. Patrice, it happens far more often that they, by the time it gets to court, that they don't want to press charges and that they don't want to cooperate, than I ever saw people want to cooperate. To the point that if we had a case where the victim was very involved and wanted that person prosecuted, I don't know how to say this without it sounding awful, we became suspicious. We started to think that this person's got some sort of ulterior motive. Why are they so eager to see this person prosecuted? And we wondered, did it come down to some sort of custody dispute? And are they trying to get an advantage in a divorce? Or is there some other reason that they're pursuing? Because we were so used to them not wanting to cooperate, because that was just kind of how these cases were usually handled. It was a very sad state of affairs. Continuing. I put that in the past tense, but it's not past tense. It is the state of affairs.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Any last thoughts or points that you have on this? And then also anything that you have coming up on your channel?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy talking to you, because this is so much of the stuff I'm fascinated with, but not trained in. And I love to hear your thoughts on these things. Last thoughts on this. I think this is one of those cases, it's still so early on that as this continues to progress, we're going to get a lot of answers to these questions. Some of them are probably not going to be all that satisfying. I think that we are going to find that this is one of those cases where maybe more could have been done to avoid this. And I'm not even saying by the Tepes. I'm saying by perhaps friends or law enforcement or something, that I just can't imagine this went on for 8 years and no one was aware of this and she kept it all to herself. Could be, but I just have a sneaking suspicion that we're going to find out it's going to become one of those things where it looks like a train wreck that was inevitable, that more could have been done. But again, thank you for having me. Yeah, I encourage everybody who's listening that's not already following me over at Courtroom Confidential, please come over. We'd love to have you. And what is today? Saturday, which means tomorrow, Sunday. So we have our big show Sunday mornings called Sunday Fun Day. It takes place at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, where I encourage people to leave me voicemails throughout the week. And then I answer the questions live on Sunday. And it's a lot of fun. We talk about serious stuff. I don't mean to trivialize true crime and the things that the subject matter that we discuss, but we have a good time kind of going through a lot of the questions we've been discussing today, and about a vast array of different cases and questions. And I was just going through a lot of them today, and it's a bunch of really good questions again. So nice. I'd love for everybody to check it out.
Nice. I will definitely check that out tomorrow. Did you watch Brendan Banfield's testimony? Did you
I
watch?
watched a lot of it. I watched the high points, and I put that in quotes because it wasn't really high points. It was a lot of low points. But you and I talked about this too. He's just a phenomenally fascinating character of somebody who just wants to be this hero and wants to be viewed as a good guy. Still wants to have been this. I cheated on my wife a little bit, but that affair had ended, and everything was fine. And then I tried to save her, and he's just I say narcissist. I don't know if that's the right word, but it just screams of a really what a character he is.
It was so bad. And I'm telling people the jury has so much information to look through.
Yeah.
A lot of people were getting nervous that the jury was still out, but they have all of those messages and letters to read through and go through. They're talking about it for the first time, and I think they are taking their time. Please just stay on real quick once I end, and I will chat with you real quick. But thank you so much again. I hope you all have a great evening. Bye.